Okay. Okay, so here are the instructions for the lab today. Um, I'm on page 357 where you have to determine height by looking at the bone length. So on part one, you have to measure your femur, your tibia, your humerus, and your ulna to the nearest 0.5 centimeters. So you have to have a centimeter ruler. And then you record that. So you measure each of those on yourself, and you have to record that on page 359 for bone length. And then to figure out calculated height in centimeters, you have to use the formulas on page 361. So if I'm looking at page 361, I look at humerus. I am Caucasian, and then I'm going to use the female um, formula to figure out the calculated height. But you guys would use the male. Then you would calculate that, and that would be in your calculated height for centimeters. And then to convert it into inches, go back to page 357 and use that formula to figure out how to put height in inches. And then to figure out calculated height with feet and inches, you have to divide by 12. So fill out that whole table and just see how close you come to your actual. Probably have to figure out your actual height if you don't know it, and then see how close it actually is. Then for part two, I have bones that are going to be laying on the table. They are not labeled, so you have to figure out, first of all, what bones they are. You can use the skeleton, but you then have to do the same thing. So you have to measure the bone length, do the calculated height, and they tell you, like for the ulna, it's a Caucasian and it's male. But for the femur, it's an African American female. So to figure out its calculated height, you have to go back to page 361 and use for the femur an African American female calculation. And then you put that in calculated height and then do it for inches. So use that formula to put into inches and then go to feet and inches. So fill out table 3. There are right and wrong answers to that. And then table 4 is the final table. And that is, they already give you the bone lengths. You don't have to measure them, but then you have to figure out the calculated height and of the centimeters, inches, and feet and inches. They also tell you that it says it's a shallow grave filled with skeletal remains of what is believed to be at least 2 people was recently discovered in a nearby county. Only a mix of arm and leg bones were found in the grave, which made it difficult for the sheriff's department to determine how many victims were buried. The sheriff's department carefully measured each bone. This length data just arrived in our lab today. They would like for you to use height calculations to help determine the number of victims in the grave. The bone length data found on page 4, and you have to complete the bone evidence summary so we can send the results back to the sheriff's department. So you are going to have to use, because you do not know what race and sex they are, you have to use for calculated height, you have to use all the unknowns. So I'm measuring the ulna, it's 24 centimeters. So I have to go to, on page 61, the ulna to the unknown and use the unknown for the formula. And then you should get calculated heights, and you should be able to tell then how many different victims you believe were in the grave based off of their height. If you get done with all of that, you should do your questions on page 362. Again, all the instructions are on page 357 and 358, so you might have to read through a little bit, but make sure you're measuring accurately. Good luck.